What's up, rockers all across the world? Shaking it up. Firstly, I don't have a hat. That's completely new. I got freshened up because it's different. It's totally different. Usually have come some musical artist something on, but today we're mixing it up, and I'm very stoked to have her on because I've made this. I made the comment to her. We talked a little bit offline, but I kind of like put her as the modern day Julia from Uranium days, and I miss Lauren from Loudwire. Hey,
Hi. Thanks for having me.
you've seen her on 60-second roundups of like band history of Pantera, Alice in Chains, all that cool stuff. And I thought it'd be fun to have her on. I thought this would be have the journalist on the other side.
Killer. Thanks. I'm honored. How's it going?
Happy Friday. It is Friday right now. Probably just will dropping into Friday. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
How's your week
Little
been?
little happy hour. Oh, my week's been I don't even know how it's Friday. It doesn't feel like Friday, but at the same time this week did feel like an eternity, so it's kind of this like weird feeling of I'm in shock that it's the weekend but relieved it's the weekend.
It was like it always goes January is the longest month ever. February is short as fuck, and you're like, oh my god, it's March, and now May's coming. April, May.
It's St. Patrick's month and I pretty much celebrate all month long. And then it's spring and all the serotonin comes back from the warm weather. So I'm excited for all that.
And for Californians, for us, everyone's like, "Oh my god!" And the gyms are overcrowded as ever. They're like, "Sun's out. Oh my god, I gotta get back into shape." I'm like, "Thanks, you're crowding up everything I use now." Thank you.
Of course, of course. I'll be trying to run a little bit more outside this year. So
That's okay. You have a bunch of dogs to do that with too, so it's perfect.
yes, new week, new dog.
But as I mentioned, I thought it would be really cool, a nice mix up. Have someone on the music industry side on, and I think she has a very good, important opinion, and I hate the terminology, but you know what? She is kind of an important influencer in the music world, I would say. I hate that word. It's a bad word right now. Lately, there's a bad, connotation with influencers, but
Yes.
I'll use that in a positive wordage.
Yeah. I, I I feel like we need to come up with some other kind of term for it for people who are like, "Oh, I don't want to call myself that," but at the same time, like, there are
Yeah.
people who I get messages asking how I feel about certain releases and new songs and this and that. And I'm like, oh my God, why does what I think about it matter to you?
But more importantly, you can actually say you are a professional music journalist. You are in journalism, so that's the most appropriate title for
Yes, crazy. But
it.
yes,
And we talked about a little bit. Of course, I had to wear one of my favorite AIC shirts on.
love it.
And I know she's a big AIC fan. I'm a huge AIC Cantrell fan. I got my Cantrell wall over here that I love. But it's dive in for a fun question first before we get nitty gritty and some like deep topics. Let's go. There's two generations of AIC. We have the Lane, we have the Duval. Let's go. Your favorite Lane album and your Duval album.
Favorite Lane album. It depends on the day. It's usually a toss up between Dirt and Facelift, but I'll go Dirt for long term purposes, just because I think that that one had the biggest impact on their career and on so many other bands that came afterwards. There are so many late '90s, early 2000s bands that have that Dirt sound to them that it's undeniable how big of an impact that had. So there's that, and then for Duvall, I would say Black Gives Way to Blue. I think that that album is super, super killer. It was a huge comeback statement for a band who took years away from what they were doing because of the loss that they had endured. They didn't think that they were going to carry on again. And then to come back is, that you're going to be completely dividing your fan base. There's either people going to be fully supporting you or they're going to be skeptical, they're going to be critical, and they're going to be like, this isn't Lane, this isn't Alice without Lane, that kind of thing. So I think that Black Gives Way to Blue was the perfect comeback statement, and that album just like all the way through, it's one of those where there aren't filler tracks that you want to skip and everything. So I think that I have to go with that one for sure.
I still remember as a kid. I could say that. And I still remember as a kid when they announced they were coming back and they brought Duval and they announced the Black Gives Way to Blue and they played Check My Brain on MTV Headbangers Ball.
Mm.
MTV2, shout out Josta back in the day. And I'm like, Dad, look, they're playing new Alice in Chains. And he came into the room and he was like, what? And he loved it from Check My Brain. It's a great anthem song, phenomenal great anthem song. And those are appropriate choices. They are very appropriate. I'd still say Facelift is my all-time favorite. It's heavy, gritty, just Man in the Box. That opening riff for Man in the Box is just so
There's nothing like it.
soul defining. That's when I knew I wanted to play the guitar because of that opening
Yeah, there you go. That's
riff.
massive. Everybody has that one that they can go back to and say that is the song, that is the riff that made me want to do music. So that's really cool.
And Black is White and Blue was like, again, that was their pivotal thing of them coming back out as a band and forming and stepping out. And there were so many eyes. What's going to be like, with this new singer in there? And I always respected Duvall for, he does have the Lane sound, but he never tried to emulate Lane.
Yeah,
He was still himself.
for sure. That I think is really important. And I think most bands who have been successful with finding another singer, they all kind of have that. And because if they try to emulate the original too much, then it just doesn't work. And again, it brings back the criticism and everything. So I think all of the greats who've done it, like Brian Johnson, you think about all the second singers or afterward singers, whatever you want to call it. They all the greats, they've been had that quality to them.
Now, have you ever caught? Because like I said, I'm a big Cantrell fan, huge Cantrell fan. Have you ever caught Cantrell for his solo tour, solo
Yep.
music, stuff like that? Now,
Yep.
what did you think from seeing him live? How much did you take from that?
So I saw two shows. One was in the city, and they played so much Alice in Chains and like so much Alice in Chains that Alice in Chains doesn't play with as Alice in Chains. Like Jerry was playing, um, why can't I think of the name of the song? Songs from Facelift that like William doesn't do,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
faster songs because Greg, I think I don't know if it's Greg or the band, but they have kind of a more fast-paced, powerful energy, I think. I mean, when I saw the times I've seen Alice, they're incredibly loud and really good, but they definitely slow the pace of everything down a little bit. Whereas seeing Jerry, I think it was kind of like there was a youth brought back into it by playing with those other
yeah.
guys and by playing with Greg. And yeah, I thought it was killer. And then also his solo material, it still sounds like Alice without sounding like Alice. So I don't know. There was a whole debacle that we got into the second show I saw them at. I brought my dad, and we were standing by a group of people who were talking the entire show, like speaking to each other face to face and in
I
my
remember you
ear.
posting this. I do
Oh
remember
my
you
God.
posting this.
And it was to the point where we weren't able to hear the songs because they were that loud, like screaming to each other, having a conversation. And then anytime an Alice in Chains song came on, they shut up because they knew it. But they weren't even giving Cantrell's solo material a chance. And they were interrupting everybody else's time in the meantime. So I almost ended up getting into a brawl with said people and had to walk out of the show. But yeah, I think that any Alice in Chains fan, like even when you listen to his early solo works that came out in the 90s, that still sounded like Alice too. Like Cut You In, that sounds like it absolutely could have been an Alice song.
Well, it's interesting, and people just never they just don't equate it because they always equate it to Lane. They know Kenshiro for his playing, but they don't equate him for his songwriting, which they kind of know from Rooster, and he admits, it's about his father and everything. But when you go see him live, and if you didn't know this beforehand, Cantrell is so much of Alice in Chains that you really see it when he plays and does his solo tour. Especially when you go back to Boggy Depot and Degradation Trip.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, Lane wrote a good amount of songs, but Jerry wrote most of the songs, and I think that might be something that a lot of people who are more casual listeners, you never really equate the lead singer as not being the main lyricist. Like Motley Crue is another example, and there's and Rush. There's so many examples where the singer isn't the primary lyricist, and in this case, Lane did again write a handful of songs, especially on the Tripod album, but Jerry is really he's the one who emulates Alice in Chains the most. That like there wouldn't be an Alice without Jerry, and it's different without Lane. but they also had Mike Starr early on, and then Mike Inez came in, and Sean Kinney's never been gone. And I'm not trying to say that any of the members are replaceable, but
Yeah.
Jerry is the one.
Yeah.
Like an Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses would never be them without Axl.
He
So
wouldn't,
it's
it would
like,
never be this thing without Slash.
yeah, yeah. So I think Jerry is really the one who's like he's the most irreplaceable part.
And it's, I'm sure you've watched the Gibson Icon series of Cantrell
Mm-hmm.
on there, and he even brings it up that Lane's the one that pushed him to start singing more. Like
Yeah,
he never thought himself of doing that. He's like, dude, you have a great voice. These are your lyrics. You should be singing these as well.
because Facelift Lane was definitely more prominent as the main singer through most of this. They didn't like they had some of the harmonization, but it didn't really become more of their signature in like every song until Dirt, and especially on the third album.
Yeah.
Actually, Jerry sang lead a handful of songs later on. So
Yeah, so I highly, if you've never seen him anybody, please go see Jerry Cantrell. It's a phenomenal show, and you won't.
yes.
I I'm almost, even though I'm not sad, he does a bunch of AIC songs, but I'm a little bit. I wish he did so much more of his solo work too, as well, because there's some deep cuts I always wanted to hear live. So I
Mm-hmm.
have to go back on YouTube and watch some old videos of him doing his solo tour, which he had Duval for a bunch of his solo tours. Like one of the couple first ones, he had Duval on there doing some AIC songs back in the day, back in like '99 or '98 or something like that.
Oh wow. Yeah, another thing is I think I've talked to Greg Puciato and he's a massive Lane fan. So I think that I don't know if he has any input on how the set list goes, but I'm sure that there's a couple of, Alice in Chains songs that he is like, I really want to sing those because I can. So
But I knew we were gonna, as soon as I bring up Alice in Chains, I knew we were gonna have a big old conversation on that, which is
oh
good.
yeah. Love them.
But let's go into you. All right, let's start talking about how did you deep dive into the rock genre? Because it's always someone brings you into the rock genre, and now a lot of people don't usually kind of find it as their, in their way. But maybe you did. But how did you get into, say, the rock music? What kicked you off as you're loving it, like the Alice in Chains, Guns N' Roses fan?
Well, I think my story is probably similar to a lot of other people in the rock community in that I grew up on it. It was my parents. They had a big impact. I talk about my dad a lot. My mom had a pretty big important part too. Um, I just always remember I was really good at remembering song lyrics. So from the time I was like 3 years old, I was able to sing along to some of the songs I would hear on the radio. And my parents would play the classic rock stations a lot. I was a really big Billy Joel fan when I was really young. So like two, three, four, that the Nylon Curtain was like the first album that I remember just playing start to finish on a daily basis on like a little tape player. And from there it went to Bon Jovi and that more no digs to Bon Jovi, but just more like digestible rock for a young kid to sing along to. I was a big fan of Led Zeppelin without knowing who Led Zeppelin was. I would always hear Black Dog come on. I would go, "That's Robert Plant."
It's
And then one day my dad said, "No, it's actually Led Zeppelin." I was like, "What are you talking about? That's Robert Plant."
like putting Ozzy in
Um,
Black Sabbath and like, oh wait, that's Black Sabbath, that's Ozzy. No, it's Black Sabbath, man.
yeah. Yeah. And I was a big fan of Aerosmith and just a lot of the classics growing up. And then around I had a little Avril Lavigne phase at the time. Under My Skin came out. She was very rock back then. So I don't it's not
Her pop
straying
punk
from the
days,
path.
yeah, her pop punk days, yeah.
Yeah. And then when I was in the fifth grade, my mom got me, she was always talking about like, you should listen to this band Guns N' Roses. And I was kind of like, nah, like mom's telling me to do something and I'm not going to do it. So I just didn't want anything to do with it. But she ended up getting me one of their CDs for Christmas. It was the greatest hit CD. And it just that my life changed from that point on. So Guns N' Roses. And then from there, I was always looking up, bands that were similar to them. So around 10, 11, 12, I was
Which is
getting
hard,
into,
very hard.
yes, yes. But of course, they get unfairly lumped in with a lot of hair metal bands. So that was a lot of the recommendations that were coming up. And I loved a lot of that music. 10, 11, 12 was Whitesnake and Rat and Poison. And I was like watching VH1 Classics 80s specials all the time. So I was discovering more and more of it. And um Yeah, so while everybody else in middle school was having like a pop punk phase and they were going to like, the Warp Tours and everything, I was just like this weirdo girl who was listening to bands that were already 20 years old. Yeah, 20 years old at the time. And none of my friends knew who they were. But yeah, so that's how I got into rock. And then when I was, I think in middle school, maybe it was like eighth grade, my parents put on Pearl Jam's 10, and I was like, this is like different. I definitely wasn't loving it as much at the time because when you're young, that darker stuff doesn't. I mean, the first time I heard Alice in Chains on Guitar Hero, I was like, this is scary. It was Them Bones came on, and I was like, who would want to listen to this? It's depressing. But yeah, so Pearl Jam, first like grunge band I remember ever being like really exposed to, like full on listening to an album start to finish. And then in high school, my dad like made me shut up in the car one time when a Soundgarden song came on, and he was like, "You got to listen to this guy's voice. Listen, listen. He has this other band, Audio Slave." I'm like, "Why is this guy's bands so have such weird names?" And so then I started listening to Soundgarden, Audio Slave, and then that turned into an Alice in Chains obsession. And um, yeah, so from that point on, I think as I got older, my taste got a little bit heavier and darker and more grim just because I was older and was able to kind of understand it more
Yeah.
and digest it better.
Did you get the side bangs? You don't understand me, mom. Oh my God. Get the black slap down
So well, the thing is, like, my mom did understand me.
there.
I think it was all my friends who didn't. That everybody was listening to pop music, and I was very much always an odd one out when it came to discussions about pop culture, or like, even in college we'd go out and I would be, I would have two drinks in my hand because everybody would be singing along to the songs at the bar, and I'm just like chugging both of them because I don't know any of the words. So that was my excuse. But yeah, I've kind of always been like the I don't know who that is, or like what is this? The kind of like the get off my lawn type of girl. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very similar in how I grew up. I always had the Poison, Scorpions, Rats, Cinderella, CDs. My dad was always UFO, Foghat, all that stuff, the classic stuff. But then I turned him on to some new stuff. I turned it on to Godsmack. I never forget the day when he like, I'm like, yo, you gotta listen to this. Like, you gotta listen to Bad Religion. He fell in love with Godsmack ever since. So
Yeah.
there was some good give and take because I understood that being the only one in your friend group, especially in like high school, who's listening to Metallica still or Led Zeppelin, and everyone's listening to freaking to the windows, to the wall.
Hmm.
High school.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a lonely time, but as I think as like a music enthusiast, you get excited as you learn stuff about bands, and all you want to do is talk about these facts that you're like absorbing about all these. You're reading biographies, you're watching interviews, you're watching performances, and you just want someone to talk about all this stuff with. And you don't have any friends to do that with, and your parents are like, "Oh my God, I lived through it. Like, I don't want to live through it again because of you," So,
Yeah.
but I did teach my dad a lot of stuff for sure. And yeah, like I did the same. I taught him a lot of late 90s, 2000s bands. Godsmack's one of them. Uh, got him more into Shinedown, got him into Seether. And yeah, so I feel like now I get to kind of return the favor with him a bit.
And take him to more shows. Like, oh, you got to check out this new band, or send him a link or something.
Yeah, he's usually my plus one to concerts.
Well, that's a perfect segue then. What was your first concert? Your first, like, what do you remember going to as your first show?
First concert was Bon Jovi on his Have a Nice Day tour, and Nickelback were opening. They played
Hey,
at,
that's pretty.
yeah,
That's pretty good.
yeah, I was a big fan of both at the time, but my cousin came. It was both my parents, and we brought one of my friends. And I remember we went to, it's now called MetLife, but it was Giant Stadium at the time. And we had, I guess, section three, like tier three seats. So they were like this big. And yeah, it was a great show though. And I just like, I had the time of my life, and I was like, I want to do this all the time. But then I didn't end up going to a concert again until I was a sophomore in high school, and that was Guns N' Roses with the Chinese Democracy lineup. So,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
and then Van Halen after that.
I am so bummed. I missed seeing Van Halen on their last run. and it was in San Diego. And I don't know why I couldn't go. Oh, the girl I was dating, never miss a concert for someone you're dating. She didn't want to go, and so I didn't go see Van Halen. I thought it
Mm-mm.
was so life lesson.
Oh, I beat you to it. Last summer, my boyfriend was supposed to come with me to Guns N' Roses, and he said he couldn't. And I was like, and I still went by myself, and I stood in the pit, and I was perfectly content. So,
But I would say I'm a little bummed. My mom held me back from one of the first concerts I could have ever gone to. Would have been System of a Down, Linkin Park, and POD.
oh my gosh. Wow.
I
When
was
was that? What year was that?
I was in fourth grade, I think at the time, fourth or fifth grade. So that had to have been like 2000, 2001, 2000 around there, like right in their prime. Which I
Oh
did
my
get to see
gosh.
Linkin Park eventually, but like to see that tour specifically would have been amazing.
So, what was your take as a fourth grader listening to System of a Down? Because they're kind of a wild band.
But that's the reason why my mom did not let me go.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
didn't like the name. She's like, what does POD mean? Like she
Yeah.
didn't not even knowing. I didn't know they were at the time kind of like considered a Christian band at the time.
No, I
Uh,
didn't either. Till probably like 2 years ago. So,
but she was just looking at the System of a Down. That sounds negative.
yeah.
What are they down about?
I mean, their music's pretty uppity, but it definitely as if I was like 8 years old. I think I did when I was in elementary school. I remember hearing the song "Vicinity of Obscenity." I believe
Um,
that's what it's called, and like the banana, 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 like, and I thought that that song was super fun. But obviously, the rest of their songs are not like that.
I mean, I don't feel bad because when I was like, I was a little kid. I had to lie to I convinced my grandmother to buy certain CDs for me, and she would be like, "It says parental advisory. Are you sure you can watch this?" I'm like, "No, you just have to buy it for me. I'm not old enough to buy it, so you have to buy it for me." That's what it means. I would make her buy Limp Bizkit and all these other stuff that have that and System of a Down and Disturbed because I had the first debut album for Down with the Sickness and the whole that special line of fuck everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good workaround.
But my first official ever, finally, and I had to buy my own ticket, ironically, for it because I was still working in high school. But it was Taste of Chaos 2008, Bullet for My Valentine, Avenged Sevenfold, Atreyu, Bless the Fall,
Wow.
all in their primes. It was,
So you made up for it.
but I still remember this one. This is one of those moments where like you'll see it pop up like whether Loudwire or Metal Injection or somebody like, oh, this time back in the day, so and so singer filled in for this band. Did you know this? Treyu, this was like when Treyu was huge. Alex blew out his vocals, and Matt from Bullet stepped in and sang songs for Treyu.
Oh wow.
That was so cool.
That's a big undertaking when you have your own band set to do also.
Yeah, that was
Crazy.
incredible, and I'm like, I will never forget that moment. And they didn't have any phones back then, so you couldn't take photos.
Of course.
But I still have the ticket and memories.
Yeah, that's how you did it back in the day.
Well, then, what's your take on whether it's controversial or not? The Slayer reunion, their timely reunion 4 years later. Because I went to that farewell tour. I went to the first show. So
Okay, so sometimes we get like a notification like a little bit ahead of time when some kind of huge massive news is coming just so that we can, mentally and like physically prepare for it and like have stories prepped and everything else. And we were just having a normal Wednesday, and my editor goes about, I don't know, 20 minutes before they announced Louder Than Life. He goes, "Okay, I just got like the thing in for Louder Than Life. Can someone like prep this photo? Slipknot, Slayer, Korn, and Motley Crue." And I go, "Yeah, wait a second." I said, "What do you mean Slayer?" And he goes, "Wait, wait, 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 wait." And then like everybody's like, "Huh? What's going on?" And we're like, "This is going live in 15 minutes, guys. We got to get the story prepped. Like, this is insane." So I wrote the story and I was like panicking. I'm like, is Carrie King in it? Like, we don't know anything. Like, he was just saying a week ago he hasn't talked to Tom in so long, and what is going on? It was
Announced his tour and everything with his bands.
I was like lightheaded trying to write the story because I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And then it goes live and we end up getting a press release saying that Carrie's back, Paul Bostad, everybody's back. And I was like, okay, so was Carrie King's whole thing a lie? Like they've just been like playing us like fiddles this whole time, like saying that they don't talk and that it's never gonna happen and everything. Um, as far as it being a thing, I just think at this point, and this is coming from me as a fan, not as like I'm giving anybody any kind of professional advice or anything, but don't listen to bands when they say that they're going away. Like, just don't. At this point, we've seen way too many times they come back. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I've just seen so many people complaining online about it because they're like, oh, I spent a lot of money on the final tour. Like, why'd they come back? And I mean, my opinion of that is okay, like, but now you get to see them again. And now other people who never got to see them get to see them.
Exactly.
And also, I don't think a band is required to stay in retirement because their fans don't want to feel like they got screwed over. Like I think that people can change their minds. I know my dad retired a couple months ago and he sometimes doesn't know what to do with himself with all the free time now. So I think that maybe retirement seems like a good idea. And then after almost 5 years, you're kind of like, all right, like I can handle going out and doing like 3 shows like for the fans and just to have something to do and to kind of
Yeah.
just like feel that high again, because you have to think that these musicians, that's their livelihood. They spend decades touring, making albums. Like, just they're constantly running on like adrenaline and creativity, and then all of a sudden that comes to a screeching halt. They probably need, like, have the cravings for that again. And I'm not a musician, but I don't think that there's anything else in the world that can kind of like take the place of that feeling. So I think that doing one-off shows here and there makes complete sense, and that everybody in rock and metal just want to be mad and bitching about everything all the time.
But you exactly kind of nailed it, and that's what I kind of brought up to other people because on top of running the show and doing my own little journalism thing, and then I'm also playing and tour managing other bands, and being ex-military and coming back from tour and being in the military. People have always asked, well, how did you drift towards into the music industry and doing all that stuff? I'm like, well, honestly, it's a very similar timeline. You going from one thing you known for like, say for me, it was 7 years of my life. What the fuck do I do with myself afterwards? That's why this is, and I'm sure a lot of musicians have their version of PTSD. PTSD isn't just military. For them, this is why a lot of them get depressed. They love being on the road. They love playing, the high of playing in front of people, seeing new people. When they come back home, they're home by themselves
Yeah.
again. So now they have to deal with that rush coming down by themselves.
Yeah.
So that's what
So
people. I think it's a positive. I'm like, cool. They're playing some festivals. I saw them on their tour. Seen them at some festivals. This is great. But it's like you said, don't take. If it's a farewell tour, take it with a grain of salt.
yeah, I mean, we just saw it with Motley Crue, and now they're out there killing it. And I have friends who had the same thing with them. They're like, oh, I spent so much money on their final shows. And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, no one told you to do that.
I don't think Kiss is going to be forever done. I think they're going to be forever done touring, like a large tour, but I think they're going to do some pop up shows like at the Sphere. I think that's going to be the ultimate platform for bands to come back and do,
Ah.
their legacy, their a whole like, oh, all right, we're going to do 4 shows here for a Regency thing.
That's actually, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I can't imagine Kiss ever being like done either. And these Avatar things that they supposedly have going out, I don't know. I mean, and Gene Simmons is still playing, like he's still going to be playing shows. I don't remember who exactly he said with, but if he wants to keep doing it, if there's certain entities in the band that want to keep doing it, I think that it just comes back. That was the case with Slayer. Tom was the only person who really wanted to retire. Everybody else was kind of like, why'd we do that? So
Unless they break up, like Every Time I Die, when they had their huge blowout between family because it's brothers in the band,
yeah.
then I take it seriously. But if it's just a band deciding that, they're just going to need a break, give them a year or two, and they're like, hey guys, let's do this again.
Yeah, but even with brothers and fighting and everything, like look at the Black Crows. They were brothers that split up, and I think it was 2015, and they 4 years they went, and then they announced their reunion on the Howard Stern show, and it was because I think their daughters or somebody in their family convinced them to start speaking again. So I just don't think, like, unless you're the Beatles and the inevitable things that happened to George and John, you can never actually bring the Beatles back. But Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr still worked on a song
Yeah.
with AI John Lennon. So anything is freaking possible nowadays.
Um, you kind of brought it up too. Yeah, as I mentioned before, you're part of Loudwire and you guys get certain things, but how did you it's a how did you become a music journalist? How did you step into this world? How did you know you want to be in it? Because it's a unique path that some people like myself just found myself in it.
Yeah. Unique to say the least. It's funny because like I get messages from younger people who are in high school and college, and they're kind of like, I want to do what you do. How do I do it? And I'm like, oh boy. Like this was never a dream for me. Like it when I was a sophomore in high school, in the middle of my like audio slave Soundgarden, like on repeat all day every single day phase, music was still so important to me, but I was fully set on becoming a forensic psychologist or some kind of criminologist or something along those lines. And I went to Florida State because, well, for a multitude of reasons. They do have a really good criminology school, so that was just one of the cherries on top.
It'd be the
But
next True Detective season on HBO.
I my dream my dream was to be Clarice Starling. But then, you go to college, you take the courses, you're in college, all your professors are telling you, if you think you're going to be Silence of the Lambs, you're not. So they kind of crush your dreams real quick. And I still was kind of like, okay, like I had a family member who was sort of helping me on the trek into the FBI and guiding me. I didn't smoke weed all throughout college. Like I was so well behaved. I drank a lot, but I didn't do anything that was like questionable for getting in. And I think it was right after my uncle passed away, my dad's older brother. He was in a couple of bands, I think. He was a musician, and his band actually had their own version of the song Dancing in the Moonlight, and theirs was supposed to be the one that was released as a single, and their manager got killed in a car crash, and so they put out King Harvest's version of the song instead. So like my uncle was like legit in bands. He had like some kind of recording studio, and he's apparently like partied with rock stars and stuff. And he passed away from Alzheimer's in the summer of 2016. And then we put my dog down a few weeks later. And so it was like a really rough couple of weeks. I'm getting real into detail here, but I remember I was following a Twitter account. It was Alternative Nation, and they were posting all this stuff about the Guns N' Roses reunion, like all through the year. It had already happened by that point, but the concert was like 2 weeks later.
Remember that tour? That was my first time seeing Guns. That I saw them in LA. It was an evening with Guns N' Roses. It was just them. Phenomenal.
Oh my God. Wow. Um, yeah, so they were posting all the rumors about the reunion leading up to it, and I was following them. And then in the summer, like after my family had those two big losses, I was like kind of just one day saw that they said that they were looking for writers, like volunteer writers, and I was like, why not? Like I had a blog that I skipped this part. I had a blog that I started when I was a freshman, and I would just write about my concert experiences and bands and Guns N' Roses and how much I wanted them to get back together through my freshman year and sophomore year of college. And so when I saw that Alternative Nation was looking for writers, I sent him a link to my blog, and he was kind of like, okay, here's your login info. And I was like, what? And he gave me my first like assignment was just like a trial run. It was Slash's top 10 guitar solos. I have no idea what I even put, and then I just was kind of doing like list pieces like that. And then he suggested at the Guns N' Roses concerts, I like go up to fans in the parking lot and ask them questions and record it and make a compilation video to see what their fans think of the reunion. Where's Izzy? Do they like Appetite or Chinese Democracy better? Like just these random conversations that I would have with people, and we would put them into compilation video. So that was my first experience kind of doing anything like reporter style. I would go up to people. I'm like, hi, I'm from Alternative Nation. And they'd either stare at me and walk away, or they'd be like, oh my God, so cool. Yeah, I want to be in it. So then when I was a junior, this is a few months later, I go back to school. I'm still pursuing this criminology path, but I keep getting like concert passes and I keep getting albums to review. And I just was like starting to fall so in love with that. And it was just feeling like it was falling into my lap. And the following spring, I was still a junior, I got my first press pass to one of the like major rock festivals. So it was Welcome to Rockville in 2017. My first interview I got to do was with Taylor Momsen of the Pretty Reckless. And I was like, I like idolized her. I thought she was like the coolest. I still do think she's the coolest person ever. But as someone who was like newly 21 and kind of like just getting into music and stuff and really into her music and really into a lot of the same artists that she was, it was really cool to kind of feel this kinship with her. And so did the interview, saw Soundgarden that night for the very last time. And then the next day did an interview with Sean Morgan of Seether. And by the end of it, I was kind of like, the end of the weekend, I drove back to Tallahassee and I said, this is what I meant to do. And this is really weird, but this, like, there's too many opportunities that are falling into place. And I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing in school because I'm going to be a senior now. I'm not going to change my major, and I've come so far. But, and then in the fall of my senior year, Greta Van Fleet were like hardly heard of. My dad told me about them. He said, they sound like Led Zeppelin. And I was like, oh my God. And so I applied for press to Louder Than Life in Kentucky. I drove 11 hours from Tallahassee to Kentucky with one of my friends, and we stayed in a really shitty hotel in Indiana. And because it was like it was really close to there. But that's my one experience saying I got to stay in Indiana. And I did an interview with Greta Van Fleet, and my editor for Alternative Nation didn't really care about the interview because he didn't know who they were, and they weren't going to get us clicks because they weren't big. So I said,
little do you know, buddy.
Yeah. And at that point, I had been maintaining a YouTube channel, and I'd just been posting videos like once a week or so, like of a new song would come out, I would react to it, or like I would talk about my favorite albums or this and that. And that wasn't really doing anything. It was just kind of an outlet for me to like get my thoughts and feelings out there. Cause again, no friends to talk to about this stuff because they don't like it. And so I asked him, I said, if you don't care about this interview, can I put it on my YouTube channel? He goes, yeah, sure. 500,000 views later, because a couple months go by and Greta Van Fleet blow up. And then I'm getting paid by YouTube because I'm getting so many views on this video. I'm getting subscribers. I'm getting people like reaching out to me on social media saying that they saw my interview and that they like loved it and everything. So this is when I kind of started to feel like, oh my God, there's people that are actually like following me. Like this is kind of weird. And yeah, so then all throughout my senior year, while I'm interning at a law firm and volunteering at a psych hospital every couple of weeks because I had to do it for my degree, I'm also applying to jobs in the music industry. And I thought that publicity was going to be my route to get into it, but it didn't end up working out. And so I went to another festival that spring. I went to Welcome to Rockville again, did a couple more interviews, and actually started doing some photographing while I was at those festivals. And I did a pretty decent job in the day because I had the equipment for like daylight, not so much the nightlight, but yeah. And then that summer, right like the day after I graduated, I didn't have a job yet. So I found one that was nearby where my parents live at home, and it was a mastering studio. And I had never heard of it before, but I went in and I had an interview, and I walk up and I meet this guy, Ted Jensen, and his first project when he started there in the 70s was Hotel California. And pretty much everybody who's ever worked there has mastered every album that's ever mattered. which I came to find out as I was working there. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like working at a place that's like historical, but I was just a receptionist and I'm not really the right person to be answering phones and taking orders from rude industry people. So, um, after I kept doing the alternative nation stuff, and then 8 months after I started at the mastering studio is when I started at Loudwire.
A lot of going through. All right, I'm gonna rewind it first. I remember you talking about you writing your list. You had you writing a list for Slash's greatest guitar solos. I
Mm-hmm.
really hope something from some stuff from Velvet Revolver was on there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Slither. Um, I don't know if anything else other than Slither, because I did have some of his solo stuff on there too. Because I'm a big fan of his stuff with Miles Kennedy as well.
Uh, it may be hearsay. I may get a lot of haters, but it's okay. I can take it. All right. I'll say musically on a musical standpoint. I think I'm also just a big STP fan, so I love Scott Weiland. I always felt Velvet Revolver could have been larger than Guns N' Roses,
Hmm.
just on the musical standpoint, on their coming together as a super group band, and just Duff McKagan's bass lines, everything, the riff writing, the lyrics, it was just everything was amazing for those first two albums they put out, and then unfortunately everything that happened.
Yeah. And at the time when I first got into Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver was together. So that was the closest thing that I really had to kind of like listening to, because Chinese Democracy wasn't coming out for another few years. And I went on Google and I typed Axl Rose now. And I almost had a heart attack when I saw his cornrows and everything. And I was like, this is him. Whoa. The handlebar mustache, the whole nine yards. Yeah. I don't know because it's hard to say when I wasn't alive for when Guns N' Roses were in their prime. They were literally like the biggest band in the world alongside Metallica and at one point. So I don't know. And I don't think that super groups necessarily get the credit that they deserve. Um, Maybe because now there's so many of them that it's sort
Yeah,
of becoming a point where it's like, all right, you're not that good. But they're like back at that time, you had Audio Slave and Velvet Revolver existing at the
yeah,
same time, and like I was
yeah.
alive for that, but I was too young. So
But you've got a great, I would say, almost like I always joke and say, yeah, I'm a part-time rock star, but you have lived that life of like you wanted to go a corporate kind of law job, but like, you know what? I'm sorry, we're gonna take you away. The rock gods are like, I think you're gonna be part of this journey going on so far.
it has been very weird. I think up until that point, I was never much of a like spiritual, like believing in, the universe type of person, but that all started to fall into my lap way too
Easy.
like profoundly. Yeah, that I was like, I can't ignore this, and it also felt kind of like in the beginning when I first started doing the writing, I felt like I was paying homage to my uncle who passed, and my dad was like so excited about it because we were such a musical family. So I was kind of like the one who was getting to carry the rock torch for the family that like nobody else ever really got to go full force with. So very weird. And yeah, like I said, never smoked weed in college or anything. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this industry and they're just passing stuff to you every time you go somewhere. And I'm like, listen, I'm too paranoid for that stuff. I wish I liked it. Thank you. But I'm going to stick to the booze. But yeah.
Well, you talked about some of your first interviews did, pretty reckless either. And so it was going to be one of my questions, like, what was some of the first ones you've done? And it's always interesting to talk about. Like, I still remember my first boys that I did. And did you, when you first met them and talked to them, because you talked about how you idolized her and you were like, oh my God, I love them. And when you first interviewed them, how did you feel? Did you have that rock star aura around them? Were you composed? Were you mature? Did you know how to handle it? Were you Google eyed? How do you remember how you were reacting when your first interview?
Yeah. So there was a lot of like miscommunication kind of going on back and forth between me and their publicist. So they were saying originally I was supposed to get Taylor and Ben, the guitarist. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, we might be short on time. So you're going to get Mark and Jamie. I said, no, I'm not. I'm getting Taylor. You told me I was getting Taylor. And so I walk up, there was like a pavilion and you had to walk upstairs. And I saw Taylor from like way below because she has bright blonde hair. It's kind of hard to ignore. And I walk up the stairs. I'm wearing a Soundgarden shirt, and she looks at me and she goes and waves because she had been following me on Twitter for some point. So she kind of like looked at me like she knew me, and I was like, she waved to me? Like, what the? So I got introduced to her. We talked a little bit. She complimented my Soundgarden shirt because I was wearing a Bad Motorfinger shirt. And then it wasn't a video interview. That one was just I had a recorder. And
Okay.
so we sat down at a table and we started talking so much that Ben was like, I'm gonna leave you two alone. And he got up and he went away. And we had like such a conversation before I even hit record that I was like, I'm just gonna start recording this. If that's okay with you. She's like, yeah.
Those are
Because
the
they had
best, by the way. Those are the best interviews where just like there's nothing, there's no streamline, there's just an organic conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely had some like questions in mind, but I think I only got through like three or four of them because we were just having like such a conversation.
Yeah.
Um, the next day I brought my dad's younger brother with me because he lived in the area and Seether is his favorite band. And so he knew I was interviewing them and he actually got to record it because this was a video interview. And he was way more starstruck than I was because he got to meet him. And like after it, he's like, oh my God, like you just introduced me to my idol. And I'm like, he's younger than you. um, but yeah, I think that I surprised myself with how calm I felt during the conversations and in the moment. I do remember that back then I had a lot more of like a, oh my God, I have to remember every single question that I have written down in list order in my head and just kind of like spew off of it. So with Sean, it was definitely more of that because um he was really great. Like he gave a really great interview, but he was kind of more just like, okay, answer and then wait for the next one. Whereas me and
Yeah.
Taylor were just like fangirling together. So
Yeah.
I think it depends a lot on the musician. And if you're able to just have like a really casual conversation type of interview with them, then it works out that way. But sometimes it's just kind of more cut and dry where it's like, okay, question, answer. And they look to you and they pause and they wait for you to, say the next thing. So,
Yeah.
um, after the fact, like after I finished the interview with Taylor and I went to go, I don't know who we were going to see. I think I went and I took a break in like the food area because I was like, I can't believe that just happened. Like I was definitely freaking out a little bit. I had a moment of like fangirling. But I think over time, I know I'm not even. I still get nervous before them. Honestly, I still get a little bit nervous, and after them, depending on who it is, I still get a little bit like, oh, okay, like that just happened. But there's definitely, I think you kind of like you find your own style and you find your personality as you go on and you do it more.
It's exactly how it is. And people, same thing. Some people have asked me like, "Oh, you've interviewed so many people. What do you do to preparate? Find your own way." I'm like, it's go what you feel comfortable doing. I don't think about it till afterwards. I'm like, holy shit, I just interviewed and talked to this person. The conversation that part goes past my head until after it's done.
Yeah.
Like I'll even admit it because now they're good friends of mine. But it's like my very first one ever was with Upon a Burning Body and one of their hometown shows in Texas, and now we became all friends after that. But I'm like afterwards, I'm like, oh my god, I just did it Upon a Burning Body, and I've been listening to them forever.
Yeah, that feel it gives you kind of like a holy shit, I made it kind of feeling where you're like, this is someone that I really look up to, and I just got to like, you know, either impress them because I knew I pointed out something about like in one of I pointed out something about one of the songs that maybe they didn't think that fans picked up on and stuff. Yeah, I think it's definitely like a really accomplished feeling when it's somebody that you're a fan of. You're like, oh my God, like
Well,
pleasure meets.
I was gonna
Sorry.
say this is a great way to go into it as you're bringing it up. Who have been some of your favorites that you got to talk to that like you're like, oh my god, this was a great Obviously, Taylor's gonna be one at the top, but like, who have been some of your favorites that you've met, talked to, and it's like it changed maybe even your perspective about them as a musician. Like you to see them as a great human now too.
Yeah. So, well, when I did a grunge series for Loudwire in 2021. It was like commemorating the 30th anniversary of 10 and Nevermind and Bad Motorfinger and Temple of the Dog, all those albums. And I got to interview a lot of people for that. There was industry people, like I got to speak to Susan Silver, who managed Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, was married to Chris Cornell. Matt Pinfield, obviously he's huge in rock, and a couple artists. I got to interview Taylor again for that, and Brent Smith from Shinedown and Seether were in that, and there were a bunch of, and Miles Kennedy. They were people who were fans of the music. But then I got to interview members of Soundgarden, and I still remember how I felt when the email came in, and it was like, yeah, so you're gonna talk to Matt, and then another day you're gonna talk to Kim, and I'm like, I'm getting two, like I'm getting two members of Soundgarden. This is wild. And Matt Cameron was like probably the chillest interview that I've had with someone who's as big as he is and as important to me as he is. Like, he had a bit of a technical difficulty when he first signed on. He had like a microphone set up and was in one room, and something glitched, and he was like, hold on. And so he called me back from a different room, and it was a different setup. But so that was how it started. And then I was like, listen, man, like, I have to ask you a shit ton of questions that you have been asked a million times since your career started. And I'm really sorry about it, but it's for educational purposes. And the conversation that we got to have, just like him telling all these stories, and he seemed to really enjoy like going through all of it again. And I got to ask him about I posted this on my Instagram story the other day. One of the questions I asked him was, okay, so why did you guys write in odd time signatures? And he starts cracking up, and he's like, great question. I wish I knew the answer. And so there were some like goofy moments in that interview. And yeah. And at the end, I got to say to him, like, listen, like Soundgarden were one of the bands I got into when I was a teenager. And like everybody has their funks when they're a teenager. And that kind of music is just kind of like helped me get through it. And he thanked me for telling him that, and just, getting to have a conversation that it was so long and thorough, but like so relaxed and chill at the same time. And Kim Thile was he was also awesome, and he made fun of my roommate at the time had a Harry Styles cardboard cutout in the background, and it was so embarrassing because he was talking to it. And I'm like, the guitarist of Soundgarden just waved to Harry Styles, and I can't believe this is my life right now. Kim he's definitely like, he's so musically inclined and educated that he was like musically nerdy to talk to. So I feel like those two interviews are probably two of the most profound that I've ever done, just because they're both from a band that means so much to me and has for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I just felt so like casual talking to them. And I'm like, I'm talking to my heroes right now, but I also feel like I'm talking to my friends, and I know that they're not my friends, but that kind of thing is big. And then the biggest one I ever did, and I say biggest, even though it wasn't like the longest or my best, but was Slash. When I got to interview Slash, my coworker texted me on like a Tuesday night, and he's like, you want to interview Slash tomorrow? And I was like, what? Tomorrow? What do you mean tomorrow? So I think I like faced an entire bottle of wine after that, because I was like, I'm stressed, but in a good way. And I got to freaking interview Slash, and just hearing him say like, all right, like, hey Lauren, nice to meet you. I was like, oh my, what, like 9-year-old, like this is going back way further than Soundgarden. Like 9-year-old Lauren is screaming right now that Slash just said, hey Lauren. So he was really, I mean, yeah, he was really chill to talk to, but it was more like answer the question, move on to the next one. I think Slash he's maybe a little bit more shy. I don't know if shy is the word, but just
his temperament, I guess, like this a very calm, like I guess soft temperament, not like
yeah. Yeah. So that one was a little bit more structured. And I again felt very relaxed during the conversation. As soon as we hung up, I started shaking and crying, and I called my parents, and I was like, I did it. I just talked to Slash. Like I just literally did like the biggest thing in my life. So those I think are like, of all the ones I've done, and I've had some really great conversations with people, and really, really nice people, and some really not so nice people. But those are the three that I think for a long time are probably going to be the triumphant ones.
And those are all amazing. I mean, that's And those are, I mean, one, life defining for you, growing
Yes.
up listening to them, life defining, and also kind of career defining for you as well, like milestones that are grooming you into this industry.
Yeah. It's wild.
You're like,
Like
fuck yeah.
hearing you say that, I'm just like, wait, really me? The girl who wanted to go into the FBI. Wow. Yeah.
And it's like and no offense to, and we both interviewed a lot of people as well. It's like I've lost from how many I've been through. Paul Bernie Body, first one's always be one of my top. Rick from Adelita's Way was such a character and fun to talk to. Like he's a character, and you might have known them now because they're starting to get really big. From Portland, Dying Wish,
Hmm.
hardcore band. Um, Great. They have a lead singer Emma, but they're booming right now, and I caught them as they were blowing up. Because they
Hmm.
just finished a couple of years ago. They were touring with Code Orange, and we did it in Pomona, and it turned from like it was supposed to be 30 minutes to an hour of just talking fun tour stories, everything. It was just like such the most like how you had it for Taylor. You just let the camera go, and it's like everything just came out.
It's the best. It's the best. Would you be open to saying who your least favorite was?
Are you gonna do it?
Yeah. I had to think about it.
All right. Since you put that down on the table, my least favorite. It was mostly just because I don't know why he's very anti. He's very anti social media. He's anti industry. He's anti record label. He's incredibly just anti everything. Sean Danielson from Smile Empty Soul.
Okay.
He's very anti everything.
So he was probably just like, I don't want to fucking talk to you right now.
We had to when we did it. It was a phone because he was playing at the whiskey, and I wanted to do at the whiskey. And if I can, but this was before Zoom and everything blew up, so I like doing it in person, recording and then uploading it. He wanted to do on a phone call instead. He had to hit a burner phone to do it to call it in. It was very like he wanted to make it the most like I don't know somehow secretive mission way of doing it. Wouldn't give me any kind of like press release stuff or nothing, and it was just very awkward. It was incredibly awkward, and again, he's very anti record label record like he's so pro independent artist that pretty much Smile Empty Soul is him now. It's like there's no
Hmm.
he is Smile Empty Soul. There's no original members in the band anymore.
Wow. Um, so and this has nothing to like this isn't any digs against like the artist, but when Poppy switched over to like
Metal.
I think she called it new genre or something, where it was just like she was trying to transcend genres, and she came over, signed to Sumerian and everything, and she did that album I Disagree in 2019. So I wasn't even there a year yet. It was like the fall of 2019, and she came in, and it was hard enough knowing that I was going into an interview where it wasn't someone who's from the metal community, because you know already that the Loudwire audience is gonna be like, who is this? Why
Right.
are you talking? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but Poppy has like a persona. She's like an internet persona. She's always like, if you go on her YouTube, she had, or I don't know if she still does, but she used to have just these like minute long videos where she would just say like two words and just stare into the computer, and that would be the whole video. So she has a persona where she's just very short and mysterious and like, doesn't really give much. And I went through all the questions that I had memorized in my head, and this was on camera in the studio, all my coworkers watching, her whole like management team watching, and I like ran out of questions because she just would give very, 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 very short answers. And I looked at my editor. I said, I don't know what to say next. Like straight up in the middle of the interview. And yeah, and there were actually some people that commented saying that they saw her talk more in that interview than they ever did before. So like I did accomplish something, but in that moment I was so disappointed in myself that I felt like I didn't have enough prepared, even though I did It was
Yeah.
just because she wasn't really a conversational type of interview. It was more
Yeah.
just
She was engaged.
Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that's part of her thing. So I understand why she did that, but it was I just felt too like it was too much pressure with so many people like watching it in the studio. And yeah, I already like had that like, well, I'm still the new person feeling. So that compounded with the interview going the way that it did. I was like shook for days about it.
The one that I had the most gatekeepers on, and I was shocked because I've heard that he's not very talkative. David Silvera, ex Corn. Um, I'm great friends. He's not in there. His second project right after, or technically his third project, his project that he was going to be doing. Um, and the gatekeepers are just flooding all the Corn comments and hateful things about him and whatnot. But everybody said after our interview for I did with their band was like that's the most I've ever heard David talk after Corn.
Yeah.
So I get some of those people that are just like super quiet that just don't like it could ruin a conversation if they're not doing it.
Yeah. And I'm sure he was more talkative when he wasn't doing Corn because he wasn't having to speak on behalf of all of Corn. It was his own thing more so.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's complicated when stuff like that happens, but like you can't be down on yourself. It's hard not to be, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's great as we kind of talking about our interviewing side of things. Let's go on to like for someone like you said you had people reach out. How do I do this? How do I get into it? What would be a tip you give a young aspiring journalist or somebody who wants to do it? What would be some couple tips that you would give to somebody who would want to hop in, maybe starts taking steps and talking to people and doing more of what you're doing?
I think that you have to be gaining experience yesterday, like in any way that you can. So the second that you realize, okay, like I actually want to try this and be serious about it, like get experience any way that you can. I was fortunate enough to do it while I was still financially dependent on my parents when I was in college because I wasn't getting paid for the writing that I was doing for Alternative Nation at that time. And um I by the time I graduated, I had almost 2 years of experience in journalism. So, and I wasn't doing it full time, but the amount of festivals and concerts and album reviews and interviews I had done by the time I just graduated college, I think helped me exponentially when I went to Loudwire because I already had an established like list of things that I had done. And I think that anyone who starts out pretty much has to be willing to do it for free.
Yep.
I mean, if you're lucky enough to find a paid gig, then that's great. But I think when you're starting out, you have to be willing to do it for free. And it can be frustrating at times. And this is it's not for the faint of heart, I would say. You have to be willing to, you know, anytime you're putting yourself out there on the internet, you're exposing yourself and you're making yourself vulnerable to all of the really mean and nasty people on the internet. And so you have to not let what people think get to you, and you have to not define yourself by what, other people's opinions are, because you always have to remember that there are going to be way more negative comments than positive ones, because usually happy, positive people aren't stopping to leave comments saying how great they thought something was
They
for
just
the
hit the
most
like button.
part.
All they do is hit the like button.
It's the negative people are the ones who need to voice their complaints. So get experience any way that you can. And if you're serious about it, you have to be really dedicated. And yeah, I mean, I don't really, I never know what to say to people other than that. I'm like, you have to just start somewhere. Like, you can't
Yeah.
just go to a publication. Like, people will pitch to me or to us and be like, are you hiring? Are you hiring? Like, I love metal and I'm a writer. And like, or like, I'm going to school for writing. And it's like, that isn't, you have to really climb your way up the rankings. So that's why I just say, like, take any kind of gig to get your name out there, get your name on some kind of staff page or on some kind of byline somewhere, just so that like you can Google yourself and an article will come up.
Yeah.
That's so much more important than having a degree in journalism or social media or anything, music business, whatever, because I didn't. So
I would either. I just do it because I am like, you know what? I loved it. I love music and I love playing it. I love being in anything else. But like, for me, I saw an issue more so like certain publication companies I saw or online personalities. I really didn't like how they were representing the rock genre. I'm like, this is garbage. Why are people watching this? And I'm like, I want to
Mhm.
change this.
Yeah. Yeah. And um I don't know. I completely just lost my train of thought. I'm thinking about it, but
Well, you wouldn't see
um,
like people like emailing you, how do I do this? Like I'm doing journalism, getting a degree, and you're just like you don't have to get a journalism. Put your name, start doing it yourself for free. But you agree, you have to be comfortable doing that. Going out, and also when I've had people ask me like say like, dude, how do you do this? How do you start off? I'm like, start off with the bands that you like. Like,
mhm.
set off realistic goals. You're not gonna email Slayer's PR team and like expect to get Slayer. Let's start off with some like I don't mean it in a mean way, but some lower bands that are coming into your town. They're coming to some local shows. Email them, be respectful. Have your own like heading ledger. Have make it take it a professional because they're a professional band, but start off with bands you like so you feel comfortable.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I guess I was fortunate enough that I was communicating enough with Alternative Nation on Twitter that by the time I reached out, they kind of already like knew who I was a little bit. So,
Yeah,
um, I would say also you should be probably active on social media, even if you don't love it. That's kind of important, having a presence out there. And
love hate thing.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think it's also, like you said, really important to be realistic about it. I think a lot of people, like I said, they just think that they can get a degree in journalism and love metal and go work for Loudwire. Like I didn't even think I was going to get the job at Loudwire when I applied for it. And it's competitive. You have to really love it and you have to really, because there's so many other things you can do in the music business if you don't want to do the writing aspect of it, or if you want to make money, you got to go on the business side as opposed to the journalism side and the entertainment side of it. But yeah, I think a lot I think the most important part about getting the experience is it'll show you whether you actually one think you can do it, like can you actually write? Do you sound decent? And can you host in front of a camera? Can you speak on a podcast? Can you speak on the radio? Like you have to try all of these things before you really dive into them anyway.
The only way you honestly the only way you get better at public speaking is doing public speaking. Like you have to go through it. And I've always also said like also don't put yourself yes have a niche, but you can't put yourself in a niche. So
Mhm.
meaning being able to branch out and explore everything so that you can pull from it. Because remember, everyone's a normal person. Like explore yourself in every music genre, every kind of pop culture reference, stuff like that, so you can help you reference and pull things out while you're talking to someone. Like, oh, hey, I see you have a Pearl Jam record in the background. Oh my God, I love this album, so and so album. So you can be able to add more to the conversation than just like your Q&A. This is how you make it a memorable conversation.
Absolutely. And I agree with you about like not having to tie or commit yourself to something because I think it's no secret that rock isn't really the forefront of music right now. It's mostly pop and country. And um the more you know and are knowledgeable about those other things, the more it's just going to help you. And having an attitude of like, well, you're only allowed to like rock or you're only allowed to like metal is not gonna get you anywhere. It's only gonna hurt you. I mean, and I use social media a lot and I'm much of a sharer and I post a lot of random different things. And I've had people say to me before, like, oh, well, why don't you just like make a separate page for, your music stuff? And I'm like, well, because that's not all I am. I'm a human. I'm not a robot music journalist that
Yeah.
doesn't have anything else in their lives. And yeah, and I noticed that I like lose followers anytime I like share a pop song, like a Lana Del Rey song or something on my Instagram story, because people follow you and they expect that your life is just going to be rock and metal 24/7. And like, that's not realistic. So, yeah,
I remember
especially now.
I shared a Dermont Kennedy song and I got like 5 messages like Dermont Kennedy. I'm like, dude, fuck yeah.
Yeah, like as a music fan, it makes sense to be fans of multiple types of music. Whereas I used to definitely be a rock snob. I thought I had to dress the part. I thought I had to act the part. I wanted everybody to like look at me and be like, "Oh yeah, that girl is." She could tell she's like a rock girl. But like now, I'm kind of like I don't feel the need to make it part of my identity as much. Like on days where it feels appropriate, I will, but I don't feel like I have to live up to anything the way that I think I did when I was first starting, which is maybe just I was trying more to, get the job and get respect from people. But now I'm kind of like, all right, well, you're here. So
Yeah.
here's the Carrie Underwood song that I like.
Well, we talked about like, tips. Now let's go on the interviewee side of things. What are some pet peeves that have happened that, say someone who's watching, like, and I brought it up before, if they have bad lighting, they don't have good sound, bad Wi-Fi or something like that. On the interviewee side, what are things people should know? Like, hey, if you're gonna get interviewed by somebody, kind of make sure you have these kind of things, make sure your Zoom's updated or whatever.
Yeah, I think I notice for sure anytime I watch back any videos that I do that having an actual microphone is like really awesome because the sound quality is just really good when you listen back to it. Um, I have like a little desk lamp set up right now that is shining over so that it kind of brightens everything up a little bit just so you can see better. I think having a nice background kind of makes a difference. As you can see, my shoes are all next to me, but I didn't really have the time to rearrange my whole room. But I have this backdrop with the albums on the wall behind me and stuff. And make sure you're in a quiet place, not anywhere distracting. Um, and I think like I think my biggest thing, like of all the interviews that I've done, and there haven't really been many times where I've been kind of like frustrated by somebody, but one, don't spend the entire interview answering one question because as much as we love a conversation that is natural and feels like it flows, sometimes as the interviewer, you have like some specific questions that you want to get to. But if they spend 20 minutes answering one, you're like, oh my God, now I have to skip the other seven to get to the one that's like more important and it's not going to be relevant at all or tie in together, but I have to ask that. So, um, and then another one is just because this has happened to me a couple times, don't get so defensive and insulted when like an interviewer says something. I'm not gonna say names, but I did ask a certain singer one time how it felt to be going into a band when they had their debut album mostly written and that this person just pretty much had to sing and that was it.
Oh,
And this person, I didn't word it like that. I kind of just said, like, what is your experience when you're going in and kind of like you're joining a band and you're singing their material as opposed to your second album when you actually got to be more involved in it. This
yeah.
person did not like that. They got very mad that I pointed out that they weren't as involved as on the next time around and got a little bit insulting. So I think that maybe you need to just understand that a lot of journalists and interviewers are getting their information from something. Like I didn't just pull it out of my ass that you weren't on
Yeah.
most of the album. So just maybe not getting so defensive and treating us like we're trying to interrogate you because we're really just trying to do our job and trying to maybe sometimes think outside the box and ask a question that you haven't been asked a million times already. Whoops.
Yeah, you hit some of the important ones on there, and it's my number one pet peeve is when again they're going off for 20 minutes on one conversation, and it is not a natural give and take at that point. It's just like 20 minutes on that one conversation. And you're like trying to going through, and like fuck, I got to get to these things now because we keep it on a 30-minute or 40-minute time mark or something.
Yeah. Yeah, the time limits are really annoying sometimes, especially if you're doing it in person at like an event. Like at festivals, they
Yeah,
give you like 10 to 15 minutes, and all you really have time at that point, because you want to like treat the person like a human and kind of like get to know them slightly before you get into a full conversation. But
yeah,
by that point, you're like, all right, well, the weather's nice and so band is playing in the background. How do you like them? Like I feel like you can't really ever
yeah,
get deep with people. And oh, that's I probably think my biggest thing is there's sometimes restrictions about what you can and can't ask certain artists going into it, and So then it just results in it sounding like the same interview as everybody else is getting. And
Yeah,
the artist is just saying the same thing verbatim to multiple publications, which is boring.
cookie cutter. Yeah,
And I wish that it could be more like the older days where Rolling Stone would send you to the artist's house. I mean, I think they still do that with some people, but like you're not really getting to go and hang out with the rock stars anymore and write an interview that takes course over a couple of days so that you can write more about your observations than just it being like quote 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 quote,
yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah,
those storytelling type of interviews where they got to experience things and see how these people acted as opposed to just sitting face to face with them. I think those had a lot more life to them and it made things a lot more exciting. Whereas now you don't really have the chance to get deep with anybody anymore. And I think I think if we could talk to these artists more about life things and deeper things, then maybe people would remember that they are just people like us and they're not, these mega stars that want to be treated differently.
yeah, and it's that's kind of like the duality of it. Do they do you like say it's like for Slash or somebody, maybe their management doesn't want to get to that. So that's it's a give and take thing of how people in the management and their PR team wants to handle why they want to have cookie cutter questions and they don't want you to get they don't or like make a Poppy. Poppy wants to stay. That Poppy,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say 2 seconds in a camera and look at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's totally understandable. It's just like sometimes as a journalist, you want to kind
More.
of be the one to have a breakthrough with an artist. And it's really
Yeah,
hard to get that when there's so many restrictions and limitations now.
I understand that because I try genuinely with, and I actually successfully do with everybody I interview. I become friends with at least one person in the band. Blacktop Mojo have been great buddies of mine. Of Limbo, my homies now. It's like everybody that I have done, I have genuinely made a connection with someone in the band or the whole band, and I try my best to do that as much as I can.
Yeah, you want to feel like they're going to remember you the next time you talk to them and they're going to be able to like refer to something that you guys had a conversation about. It makes it more personable, it makes it less awkward, and it makes it feel less like you're doing an interview.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's another reason why I got into it as well. Is like I wanted to make that connection, but I was seeing lacking on online personalities. I'm not even afraid to say it. Rock feed, online personalities that just there was no deeper meaning. There was no no. It just felt like it was all fabricated. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. There's a lot of there's a lot of publications out there now, and it's so easy to kind of get your start in something like this because we all have access to social media and we all have access to equipment, and now that is kind of becoming the driving force of everything. So it's making it a lot more competitive, which it's good that there's more people out there getting it for sure. But um it makes it harder to be the one that's going to make an impression on an artist when you're competing
Yeah.
with so many other people that are doing it.
And now there's almost so many streams of ciphering the information that's actually good.
Yeah.
You kind of brought you to it as we're getting closer to winding it down. The gatekeepers, you poked at it a little bit, and I've never asked. I'm not going to ask your how young or old you are, but I've seen the comments too from some of your videos of the gatekeepers. And I'll say it. As I'm 34, almost 35, and I'll even say it's a lot of it is kind of the boomer generation, like some stuff from my dad and stuff like that. And he even gatekeeps, and I've told him like, hey, no, don't you got to put that down. You got to be a little bit more open minded.
Yeah.
Um, how is your feeling? Do you feel almost segregated from gate because each genre has its own gatekeepers, more so in metal. I'd say more so in metal. But do you
Yeah. I think
feel
metal's the
like
worst.
do you think that's what's pushing people away from wanting to listen to more and go to more of these, say, heavy metal shows?
I don't know necessarily that it's going to, I don't know. That's actually kind of a good way of looking at it. I didn't think of it that way, but I do know that even back in when I was doing YouTube and I would get comments like, "Oh, what does this like young girl know about so and so or
Yeah,
whatever?" And it only got a lot worse with Loudwire because of course I was exposed to a lot more people. They have 2 million subscribers on YouTube, and that is kind of scary, putting your face out there sometimes, knowing that you're going to get criticism. And that I do a lot. Eddie Trunk made a comment on his, I'm 27. Eddie Trunk made a comment on not a comment. He talked about an article I wrote for a whole like fucking hour on one of his radio shows, about hair metal and the term and how much he hates it and how it ruins artists' lives. And
yeah, you posted.
so
But it's termed as a generational music thing. It's not like a negative derogatory thing. It was a
no,
thing.
but the boomers apparently think it. I don't know. Some of them do, because some of them don't care. But he was saying, I don't know if this woman is 30 years old, and so she couldn't. I'm like, well, I'm not even 30, and she couldn't have lived through it. And I'm like, okay, well, paleontologists alive with the dinosaurs? No.
There's this channel on Sirius XM that has Hair Metal Nation.
Yeah. But and I don't, not even to get into too much into that, but there were definitely a lot of comments, if I those 60-second videos I would do for Loudwire's Instagram on certain bands. And there's definitely a lot of like, well, what does this girl know? Or like this girl, this girl, that, like she can't. And I'm like, why? Like, I don't understand what my age, what my gender has to do with how much I do or don't know about anything. And it's even there was one time where I did a stupid video where I drank one of those McDonald's milkshakes that went viral, and somebody said, this would be so much more cool if someone masculine was doing it. I'm like, like, first of all, I don't even really consider myself that girly. And second, yeah, again, I don't know what difference it makes. Like, why, because I don't have certain testosterone levels, that means that I can't be as knowledgeable about bands and my age. Just like, I don't know, I could probably name some more things about some of these artists than they can, because they probably don't remember it happening to them, but I read it in a million biographies. Like, you can digest information and you can learn stuff, and at any age, it doesn't matter if you were alive for it or not. We learn about all the wars in American history, and we weren't around for that, and neither were our teachers. So like, I don't understand where people's arguments come from with that. But yeah, there's definitely gatekeeping with that. And then when people, like, if they find out that, because I'm wearing a Guns N' Roses shirt in a video that's about Slipknot or something, she's a rock fan. Like, that, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that you were only allowed to like one thing. It doesn't make any sense.
It's like I'll bet you a lot of people don't know. Like John Five is the largest Kiss fan in the fucking world, and he has like the biggest Kiss collection in his garage. But you don't think that. You just think him as Marilyn Manson's guitar player, Rob Zombie's guitar player, and
Yeah.
wearing, say, a Kiss shirt while talking about, oh, John Five's going on tour right now. Like, oh, why is she wearing a Kiss shirt?
I think one of the comments I saw recently was on a Spirit Box interview I did. And a lot of people refuse to call Spirit Box metal because it's a woman singing. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
hello, people, go listen to I Wrestled a Bear Once, back Warped Tour days.
I know. And but like, just because a band has some melodic songs doesn't mean that they're not a metal band. But anyway, moving on from that, it was talking about how she's a fan of Beyonce. She's like, Courtney's a huge fan of Beyonce. She went to see them for, I think, her birthday or something last year. No, her birthday was the other day. She went to see them at some point last year, and someone commented like, how could you be like a metal musician and be a fan of Beyonce?
They all are. They all have their things they like outside of rock.
I think everybody needs it. You know what? And this might be a bit of a stretch, but I think that fans who like rock and metal fans who only always listen to rock and metal are so angry because they don't have anything other than that. And so I myself was there once too. I felt the same way. I was always shit talking pop artists and everything. And then once I started listening to Amy Winehouse and like Lana Del Rey and artists that are actually very creative outside of the rock and metal genres, I was like, wow, I actually have something to go to when I don't feel like listening to shit that makes me angry all the time. Like, I having that release and having some like an outlet to go to take breaks from rock and metal is my job. It's not just a passion for me. It's all
Yeah.
day, every day. I'm consumed by it or talking about it or writing about it. So having something to kind of go to outside of that is nice. And I think that maybe if those people gave other things a chance, maybe they'd be not so angry.
And I've been saying it for years because I've been similar to that. Like I've seen Zach Brown. Love seeing Zach Brown out. Freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Gwen Stefani live is amazing. I like the closest now the official back then. No Doubt was not going to have a reunion tour, but when I saw her, I'm like, oh, this is the closest I'm ever going to hear a No Doubt song.
Yeah.
Um, but like I've always had the mindset like you need to open yourself up to be creatively open. And when Rick Rubin put out his book, The Creative Mindset, I believe it's Creative Mindset, and I'm reading it, and first chapters are like, don't limit yourself on your creativity, on your spectrum, what you want to listen to. You got to be open to everything, and that's what artists are. That's why they're artists.
Mm-hmm. And they all have their artists that they listen to that are not really rock. So like a lot of the biggest rock and metal musicians, they worship like blues artists or some of them like country artists and everything. And you'd be pretty surprised. So if they're gonna do it, why can't we do it? And why are you telling other people that they can't do it? How does that take away your creds? This was one thing that I saw the other day. Someone commented, I've never seen Slayer. I started Loudwire when I was 2019. At that point, I think I knew one Slayer song, and it was Raining Blood. They were a little, they still are. It's Slayer. I'm not like a huge metal head. I like some of it, but I ease my way into it, you know? So I had just never given them the time of day before I started Loudwire. And then they disbanded later that year. They did their farewell tour the year that I started. So somebody the other day commented on a news video that we did about Slayer where I said I had never seen them, saying, "How do you work for Loudwire and you've never seen Slayer? You should just turn in your credentials now. Like that's like preposterous." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry that you're more qualified to do my job than I am because you've seen a band live that I haven't. Are you kidding me?"
Because the rock genre is very broad, and Loudwire covers a very broad spectrum of rock. Yes, they're going to talk about metal. Yes, they're going to talk about, say, trap metal, with Jairus Johnson or whatever.
Yeah, we talk about pop punk. We write about a little bit of everything. I just did a Machine Gun Kelly story before. So, we go all over the board. And he returned to rap. So he's not even really in the rock realm anymore.
And I brought up the gatekeeping because Loudwire made a little post about it. I think like yesterday or maybe earlier today, something about gatekeeping. I saw it on there. I'm like, oh, I should bring this up with a conversation today. That's a relevant piece, and say because I think it is deterring people from liking the music. And like I found out as I am a trainer, I'm a personal trainer on top of everything else. And one of the trainers that are in the facility that I rent from to run my business, she was very excited, and she's like, oh my God, Justin, have you ever heard of this band called Sleep Token?
Mm.
And instead of being like a negative person, like, pushing her down,
They're
like,
not metal.
yeah. And I'm like, yeah, they're pretty cool. Yeah. If you like them, you probably like them. Like, I encouraged them and like given some other recommendations that are similar to
Yeah.
them that they might like.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think that maybe they see online that the community is very just angry and kind of uninviting because I think a comment that I see from people a lot is like, well, why do they get to take our culture and like why do they get to do this and you know we grew up as outcasts and outsiders and so it's suddenly sometimes it's cool for like rock and metal to go mainstream. Like they get mad when it gets put in the spotlight. I think I do a lot of like viral stories, and there was one about a makeup trend called Rockstar Girlfriend on TikTok, and I wrote like a story about it. And there were people like, why are they like getting to capitalize and go viral off of something that they don't actually care about? And like that's ours and like blah blah blah. And I think there's this like nervousness and this sheer feel like need to protect and defend something that they've called their own. And I've been there. Like I said, I used to feel kind of the same way, but I think that I don't know, it goes back to that cliche of life is too short and why do you have to stress yourself and make yourself mad over something like that? Like let people like what they like and you should be happy if people like what you like because that reinforces that it's good.
I think what I've seen and like I've been to I've been to the Rocklahomas, the Louder Than Lives, Aftershock, uh, Welcome to Rockville. I've been to almost every major metal festival, even some of the small ones are not around anymore. And seeing, especially it was at Louder Than Life when MGK played
Hmm.
and had brought in that wave of fans during Louder Than Life, and that was very interesting. And what it comes down to is what I've deciphered and looked at is rock fans. Yeah, they're very passionate, and they feel like they've had a life experience through their music. Versus some of the pop and hip hop music, it's just kind of superficial, and they feel like maybe they're fake, and that's what they're worried about. But they shouldn't. Maybe should look at it in a way as like, hey, invite them and show them what made you love this band. Maybe you'll love it as well.
Hmm. And maybe some of them are fake. I mean, there's certain artists that you can't really like disagree. They just got really lucky. They went TikTok viral. This happened, that happened, but that doesn't discredit the fact that they did create something that a lot of people like. So just because it's
Yeah.
not your cup of tea doesn't make it like any less qualified to be counted as art. I don't know.
Do you think gatekeeping will die? Like after, say, we're all gonna die. Say the boomer generation kind of does. We get old. We can't attend shows anymore. Do you think it will die? Do you think that kind of stigma is gonna go away?
I don't know. I think in the more like extreme metal community, no. Just because I think a
Because it
lot of
wasn't the
this.
thing in the '90s. I mean, when I grew up listening as a kid, like I don't think I don't remember anyone ever being pissed off about like from '80s music and the '70s rock bands, but the '90s stuff. I don't remember it, especially not from my dad or my uncle, aunts, and stuff like that. But it's only been in the recent like last 10 years, I would say, decade. It's been really prevalent.
Yeah, and that's probably also due to the rise of social media. I kind of like blame that on a lot of things now is that it's just so much easier to have open conversations and for things to spread because of social media and the ease of it. So I think it's easier to spread like hate and anger that way too. Um I don't know. I think that there's a young generation of music fans who just like everything. Like they go on TikTok and oh now they're a Ghost fan. They go on TikTok and now they're a Kate Bush fan. They go on
Yeah,
TikTok
yeah.
and now they like Metallica. Now they like Sleep Token. And then I think that there's the people who grew up liking that stuff who think that they own it and that it's theirs and that anybody who comes in later in life and found it through a means that wasn't their dad's record collection that it means that they're not qualified to be fans. I don't know. I I think in more of the mainstream bands it's less of a problem, but I think that in more of the specific metal subgenres it's still very much a thing where it's like nope, this is ours. Like I feel like even like black metal and thrash metal fans don't even let each other like each other's music because they're so different. I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I
what do you
understand.
think?
I think the it's pros and cons. I mean, social media again has given everyone such a voice. It
Hmm.
has good and bad, but with I think we need to have my what I think it's making it worse. And no offense to them, but the problem that I see the most is kind of like we need a Warp Tour back. We need festivals that accumulate so much different music. Warp Tour really had every kind of style of rock on there
Hmm.
from everybody. 303 or somebody on there had
Hmm.
some weird stuff on there. And when you were a kid, you were going, "Who's this band? I'm gonna go check them out." You were way more open to it, you know.
Yeah.
And Danny Wimmer, as much as he's making these festivals so huge, every year it's the same bands.
Hmm.
Maybe the headlining bands are like new Motley Crue, Iron Maiden. So it's amazing. Holy crap, you got them all on the stage together. That's great. But for everybody else, the smaller stage, it's always the Cold Orange, Seether, Lilithar. It's always, Beartooth, stuff like I Prevail. It's always the same bands. They're not letting new bands be discovered, and thus you're not creating a new fan base and new people to come into it. I think that's the biggest way to change it.
I do think that the one thing that has crossed over the most is this country rock crossover,
Yeah,
where there's like the Hardys and the Jelly Rolls, and there's some other artists that are coming up that are kind of combining that too. There are so that is where I think there is a big discrepancy. Is like a lot of rock fans will comment to our radio station and be like, why are you playing this howdy stuff and like blah, like
yeah,
they they
yeah.
really aren't willing to get down with it, but then some are. And I think a lot of like the festivals and a lot of other events are starting to add these artists because I mean, listen, there's a benefit to having an artist that is Jelly Roll had a number 3 debut on the Billboard 200, and the same day Foo Fighters were, I think, number 9. So there is a benefit to kind of adding a crossover artist to an event and capitalizing on the fact that they are what's in the mainstream right now. And if they're doing a little bit of rock, even if they have a twang to it, or even if they weren't always a rock musician, so be it. Then maybe that could help bring the rock to the mainstream. Hardy is, I think, doing a full rock album now, or he said he is, and there's going to be a lot of people saying that this isn't rock because he's a country artist,
Yeah,
he's a yeehaw, he's a this and that. But um that is one area where I think there has been kind of like more acceptance amongst the industry, is people kind of accepting these more like southern rock country people, as opposed to um yeah, I guess other, what you were saying, other bands and stuff.
it was funny you bringing up the Southern rock kind of thing because Southern rock's always been. Come on, people, Leonard Skinner, all that great stuff.
Oh yeah.
That's
Oh
how it
yeah.
was. But like when I just saw Nickelback on this tour and he had Brantley Gilbert, and
Hmm.
I'm like, you know what? I'm not the country fan. He put on a good show, but he did this cool mashup of System of a Down, Godsmack, and I forgot who else he did, of just kind of like a breakdown mashup of songs. And I'm not gonna lie, hearing him sing, oh, I forgot the Godsmack song, but he's saying the deep cut Godsmack song. I'm like, and he goes in, hey, y'all forget I'm a freaking rock fan too, and it
Yeah.
goes into it. I'm like, all right, I like this.
Respect. You
Yeah,
got to respect it. Yeah.
and but I still think it comes down to some of the bigger ones, and another one is like Octane. Like I was a survivor for Octane a while, and again, they just keep they're not helping with opening it up a little bit again by expanding the genres of bands they're doing. They're playing the same bands as they're getting new, and I get it. They're getting paid from whoever to put them on there, but there needs to be a new outlet to let people discover and let the music in. Something
Yeah.
like that. And at certain places, I've done really well. Loudwire showcases everybody. Metal Injection's pretty good. Revolver is great out in the UK. They have done very well of just showcasing a lot of different styles of rock, and which I like that. And that's what I think that needs. We need outlets to be able to do that, and people then will ease into it and start seeing it.
Yeah. I mean, we even have like on certain platforms, you have your audience is skewed differently. So like on your YouTube, you have more people who are metal fans and they're looking for the heavier stuff. And then you have Facebook and it's more of an older audience and they're looking for more of the rock and the classic rock type of
Yeah.
stuff. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, it's a combination of trying to please your audience to an extent while also trying to try new things and get them to open their minds to it. And either some people are going to or they're not. You can't force them, but you can only hope that they're not going to leave you hateful comments and threaten you about it.
So this goes in. It's perfect. Another way to segue it. You know, it's the classic question, and it's like you're the perfect person to ask it, as you're not a musician. Is rock dead? Is it dying? Do you think like it's on a unpopular decline right now?
I don't think it's dead. I feel like this is a really loaded question because I'm someone who is such a big fan of older stuff
Yeah,
that all the bands I listen to are getting up there in age and aren't going to be around anymore one day. I think I don't think rock is dead. There are so many bands out there. There's so many bands out there and in my
As a
DMs,
musician
but
myself, it is really hard to book gigs right now because there's so many bands. There's like we're in a big plethora of like we're in a surplus of music right now. So much.
it's insane. It's completely insane. But no, I don't think it's dead. I just don't think that it's this in the spotlight right now. I think that there was like a little period, maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago, where pop punk got like huge temporarily all of a sudden again. Like Avril Lavigne did that, and then MGK did that, and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Blink, and everybody kind of were just at the forefront. And then now there's this like sort of, I don't know if it's still going on now, but last year there was a big like resurgence in interest in new metal and everything that was going on in the 2000s. So I think everything is cyclical and it goes through waves. I don't think that we have seen a big wave of like new bands like we have since the 2000s, like the early 2000s, when you had all
Yeah.
like the new metal
The
bands, and then
yeah.
and everyone after that. Then it was like all the Warp Tour bands and everything. I don't think that we've had a surge like that where there have been so many new bands coming out with a similar style where we've had some kind of movement. And I think that maybe we're needing something like that. But I know that country wasn't always on top and it is now. And so if that is able to go in and out, I think that rock has a chance to also. I just think it looks different
Yeah.
than we're used to. And it's a lot more of big artists from other genres experimenting with it, like Miley Cyrus putting out a rock album or something of that sorts, where we're still seeing it, but it just looks different than it did in like the 80s, where you could go to LA and
Yeah.
see a
Yeah.
different one every night and stuff.
I'd say it's like what I put it into perspective because I've had some friends that like they like the hip hop and they're like, oh dude, rock is dead, or like I just remember all the videos Finn McKenty would post, rock is dead, this is dying, trap metal's a new thing, and I just hate when he posted those videos and he just looks at it in one point of view and not a broader spectrum. And I put it up to this, I'm like, for people in my age group, I'm like, all right, do you still listen to Backstreet Boys? You listened to that full album when it came out? I'm like, no, I grew out of that. Okay. But everyone who listens to Black Sabbath over 50, 60 years ago, they still listen to the album in its entirety. But you don't listen to Backstreet Boys anymore.
Yeah.
So who has longevity?
It's not a trend.
Yeah. So that's why I put it in there. Like, no, rock, this music that's coming out now, someone's going to be listening to it another 50 years later.
Yeah.
Someone's going to be listening to Knock Loose, Shine Down another 50 years later. And still Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, all that.
And they're going to be 100 years old by that point.
And all they're going to remember ABBA for is one song.
Yeah.
That's where I'm putting it, is like the rock genre has more longevity and lasts longer than pop music.
Yeah, and I think yeah, because of trends, for sure.
Because
I
when you think of Soldier Boy, you just think of one Soldier Boy song. You're like, ah, Soldier Boy.
yeah,
It's like it's a novelty, but rock isn't a novelty.
yeah, that is true. I think the world, more of the world could do with appreciating a lot of it. Like I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
if more of like the mainstream world, I had a friend recently uh got really into Greta Van Fleet out of nowhere, and then doesn't listen to rock. Texted me because I told him that, oh, they sound like Led Zeppelin. He's like, oh, I never heard Led Zeppelin. So goes and listens to Led Zeppelin and texts me and says, oh my God, I listened to Led Zeppelin because you told me to, because of Greta Van Fleet. And wow, they're amazing. Can you tell me more? Like recommend more? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't believe I'm living in a day and age where people are discovering Led Zeppelin through Greta Van Fleet. But I think more people for sure could do with like knowing more of the classics in their life and
Yeah, yeah.
everything. So
I
that
do
is a really
think
good point.
I do think though we haven't hit any legacy bands yet in the last couple maybe a decade. We haven't hit legacy band status. I would say maybe Avenged Sevenfold is touching on that right now, but
Hmm.
like no bands are like that arena legacy band. Maybe Greta Van Fleet is getting into it. Nothing.
Ghost, maybe.
Yeah, but like we haven't hit that kind of stride for a while.
I
Like
know.
in the '90s, they were pumping it out. Tool, Nirvana, these bands were fucking filling it up like crazy.
Yeah. I will say though, with Greta Van Fleet, when I did that interview with them in 2017, they were playing little tiny venues to then be 4 years later playing Madison Square Garden. Like that's a big fucking like you
Yeah,
don't see that kind of trajectory happen that quick and that fast anymore. I there's a couple bands that I would really like to see that happen with. I would love to see Dorothy get a lot bigger. I
she has
mean,
boomed
not
a
that.
lot though. I remember when she was just small rock clubs out here, and now
Mhm.
she's evolved so much more.
Definitely. I think sometimes I'm like, why do more people not like know about her? Like she's like badass. Her music's badass. This third album was amazing. I turned my dad onto it and he would drive home and be blasting it in the car. He loved it. And like Dirty Honey, I'm a big Dirty Honey fan
Yeah.
too. Seeing them play in a really small place, I told them I was like, it was kind of like me getting to watch like a baby Guns N' Roses. Like you guys are like so awesome. And there's so many like bands like that that I'm like waiting for them to have that big boom. But for some reason, it's just like, I don't know if it's just that the industry isn't the same anymore because there's not as much money in it anymore as there used to be. I don't know what the case is, but
Interestingly, though, I'm seeing. I called it like 4 years ago, and it's becoming way more popular now, just because of Turnstile. I would say they're the Nickelback. It's a bad terminology, but they're kind of like the popular band of hardcore music right now. And
mhm.
hardcore music is having a huge, in the last 4 or 5 years, huge resurgence with Knock Loose, Code Orange, Scowl, Good People, like I said, Dying Wish, Turnstile. They're not so much more hardcore anymore ish, but they started off as a hardcore band. So it's like there's a big surge. LDL Fest. It's a hardcore festival out in Louisville. Um, Furnace Fest too as well. Like there's a big resurgence of this on top of that blues rock and roll, kind of like Jelly Roll,
Mhm.
Hardy's, and the Southern rock. I think those
Yeah.
are the two genre styles that are going to be booming the most in the next couple of years.
That sounds like it's pretty accurate. I mean, I'm here for it. My I listened to quite a bit of country music when I was a kid too, so that's kind of a little bit ingrained in my roots. And I'm kind of like digging the crossover, even if other people aren't so much. But for me, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. So I think it's cool.
Well, as we wrap it up, because this conversation took way long, it was way longer than I ever planned. It's a good problem to have. Um, let's talk about for this year. It's only the beginning of the year, 3 months into the year. What's some new music that you've been excited about? Because I create a year. I already started it. Every year I have my bangers for the year
Mhm.
playlist. I started off. I think I started back in 2020. Just as new songs come out every month, I put them on there. So, what has been some of your new music that you've been listening to so far for release?
Well, this isn't really surprising, but Pearl Jam, they have their new album coming out in April, like a week or two before my 28th birthday. So that's pretty exciting. I got waitlisted for tickets to see them, so don't know if that's going to be happening. But and then honestly, the Black Crowes, I know I mentioned them earlier, but they they put out two songs so far. Their album's coming out March 15th. It's called Happiness Bastards, and they had Waiting and Wanting and then another song called Cross Your Fingers. And the first one was good, but Cross Your Fingers, I was like, holy crap, I have to go share this on my Instagram story because it started off this like really mellow acoustic intro and then it kind of just like comes blaring in. And I was like, there are kind of like few bands that are older like that nowadays that I feel like put out something that I like want to listen to over and over
Yeah,
again. And so they have done that to the point where I actually went and pre-ordered the album. So I'm really excited about that album and the Pearl Jam album. Um and as far as concerts go, I mean, I have like a whole list of ones written down. It's all over the board right now. I have Pearl Jam. I'm gonna try to make my way to there if I can. Gonna try to go to the Rolling Stones in May. They're coming here. My dad, they're his all-time favorite band. We were looking at tickets before, and I would love to get to go see them again. And Mammoth, WVH, like they're freaking killer. I love Wolfgang. He's so great, and they put on a really good show. He's going out with I think Nita
yeah,
Strauss.
yeah,
So
yeah. I just
yeah,
caught them with her with out here in LA with Nita too.
yeah, and speaking of Mammoth, they're also doing a couple shows with Foo Fighters. I mean, Foo Fighters always put on such a fun show, so it would be good to go out and see them again. I feel like I'm very boring when I get asked questions about this because my answers are so like, oh, it's all like the biggest rock people right now. Like it's right now there. I feel like there's not anybody. I can't think of any smaller bands off the top of my head that are putting something out right now that I'm stoked about, unfortunately, but it's just because sometimes I just get in a bubble where I go back to only like this week I'm
Yeah, yeah.
making a super unknown video for the anniversary next week, and so I've only been listening to Soundgarden. So I just go through these kicks and waves. Oh, I did see Seether. They just mastered their new album with Ted Jensen, so that's probably coming out soon at some point.
Which I'm
And
so
yeah,
they don't get enough credit. See,
no.
they are such an. I think they're the best version of a modern grunge band.
And Sean Morgan is one of the best lyricists of all time.
Everything from their album, like their last three albums they put out have been amazing,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I forgot the name of the album that has "Words as Weapons." That's my favorite album.
Was that Isolate and Medicate?
Yes, that's
The
correct. Yeah,
yellow one?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and including the special edition of that with the unreleased tracks, and it's just that whole album from front to back is
That
just
whole album is good. And there's poppier songs on that too.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think of the name of the one. I can't right now, but yeah, they have some songs that they go all over the board. And then Poison the Parish, I think, is my favorite of their more recent albums that came out in 2017. That was when I did the interview with Sean Morgan. But the song like Betray and Degrade and Stoke to Fire is the opening
Yeah,
song on
yeah.
that album. That one's killer. Yeah, they're really good. And I they're probably another band that I think should be playing bigger venues than they do. And they've been around a while, so I don't
A
really know what
long
that's
time. And
about.
like the Parabellum album, I that was just like that was heavy. That was so heavy. So like I didn't even know they were finishing up their stuff because they haven't released anything. I haven't released a new single. They've done like some acoustic stuff, and I know they've done some remastered of things. And I've only caught them one time, and I would like to see them for their own tour.
Oh yeah, you have to see them at a headlining show. It's so loud. It's so loud. Like seeing them at a festival, like I've seen them a few times at festivals and at venues, and the festival shows don't compare to
Yeah,
their venue show.
and I would love to catch them. I think they've done it maybe one time. They've done an acoustic tour, maybe once, but it's like they did it out on the East Coast. And here,
Oh,
yeah, this is an all acoustic show because the acoustic stuff they put out is just phenomenal, amazing. He's such a talented singer, songwriter. The whole band is.
yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan, but I still can't get over it. Like I will always say the vocabulary. You'll listen to one of their songs and you're like, I have to look that up. I don't know what that word means.
And they're not,
He's
and they're the best band that have no, for music wise. They're not technical riffs, but they're great riffs.
because they're very Nirvana inspired.
Yeah,
They're all about the hooks and the poppy riffs.
yes, that's why I've always put them as you know what this is the best post Nirvana band you're gonna find.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
But people, for whatever reason, I mean, it's okay. You know, they're gonna get. I think they're gonna be the next one that could be a legacy band, maybe because they've been
Mm-hmm.
around for so long and they have their hits. Everyone knows their Amy Lee song and everything like that.
Remedy and Fine Again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There might be some bands that I throw out there, but I'm very. It just came out. I'm glad they pushed it out. I knew they probably did it for. It was supposed to come out in November, and I'm guaranteed they probably pushed it out to February just so they can come out for this year and be part of the rock charts for 2024. Um, Lawrence Black, they're out in the UK, and they're great. This solid hard rock band. So like their newest album, Bed of Nails, is their sophomore album. It is so hard. They're great dudes. Them, I've just recently discovered this band. I'm bummed I missed them. They were opening for Beartooth out here on this tour. They were going through for the Riptide tour and everything. Invent Animate.
Oh yeah. I've
Yeah,
heard of them. Yeah.
I'm saying they're going to be the next Bad Omens.
Yeah.
They're going to be the next ones. I was just like, oh my god, this is a nasty breakdown on the vocals coming into this. What? Oh my god, this is great. So those are the two I've been so far really excited for on music wise, and also my boys in Blacktop Mojo. They're doing some great releases up to their album coming out in April. I like they've been killing it ever since their album four, but they always can kill it. But this new album they're going to be releasing is going to be fucking amazing.
Awesome.
And I want, you know what? I may have let it, but Matt Heafy let the whole thing out of the bag. He messed it up with his post. The Trivium and Bullet for My Valentine 20-year anniversary tour that they announced. Oh, my teenage heart fucking just like exploded. Oh my god, me and I'm sure you know him, Jake Bazanari. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Him and I were messaging each other back and forth as it was going down. Like we're like, where they're gonna announce it at? And he sent it to me, and he deleted it. No, he re-edited it. So right when they timed out their releases, we all knew they were gonna do it because of how they were leading it up.
Yeah, we were a little confused about that. We were like, what's going on?
And they posted then, oh, the UK shows, but Matt Heafy posted, oh, hey, don't worry, guys, we're gonna announce more shows to come. And then he re-edited it and took it down.
Mm,
So he's gonna bring it. They're gonna bring. They had to bring it to the states. They have to. You
I'm
can't
sure they will. I'm sure.
do two big albums like that. And that like the only way to make that whole tour perfect is if Avenged Sevenfold did Backcountry with them.
Yeah.
That's the only way to make that whole because they all did all those albums came out at the same time.
Yeah.
To do that, that would just break everyone's bank account.
Well, who knows? Maybe that's what they're planning. Maybe that's why they haven't announced it. Crazy.
um, but thank you. This was a great freaking conversation. This was more. This was exactly what I wanted. One, to have someone like yourself on who is not only just a rock fan, but actually in the industry, like expose the other world, the other side of it for people to know and kind of see. Maybe even see you in a different light from like what everyone's been commenting and stuff like that.
Yeah, appreciate it. You can't ask me questions and expect for short answers. That's all I'll say.
Like I said, this was a best case scenario to have going over the time limit of what I usually do. Normally it's like 20, 30 minutes, you know, but like you can never, if it's a great conversation and things are just flowing, you can't ever control it. Whatever
Yeah.
happens, happens. But we went through a lot of good stuff and it's going to be fun editing this and put it together. Um, I'm sure everyone has seen her. I can't say follow her on, YouTube and Spotify, follow her like heart, but you can follow her on Loudwire and everything like that, and actually listen to what she says because she knows what she says. She knows her stuff, obviously.
Thanks.
Wait, I gotta ask you this question because I just got into Duff McKagan's book, so
Cool.
the
It's so
so
easy.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm loving it, absolutely loving it, and I was curious to like, so is it really that he never confirmed it? I never looked it up. But did The Simpsons really name Duff after him?
I think that that was a rumor. I think somebody denied that that was association.
Okay, because he put it in the books like, hey, someone came from so and so TV production saying, hey, can we name this character off you for beer? Because he was such an alcoholic, they referred to him as Duff the Alcoholic Man, McKagan, and he said,
Ah.
and then he's like, oh, that later. I'm like, I thought it was like, sure, whatever. I didn't think about getting royalties from it. And who's gonna watch an adult animation show anyways? And he's like, oh, that show became The Simpsons.
I read that book so long ago, so I don't I feel like I looked it up and it was like I thought I saw something that said that wasn't actually true, but I'm not totally sure.
That
I
was
cannot answer.
it's a great book. It's like if
It's
anyone
so good.
it's like I love hearing those. I wish Jerry Cantrell would put a book on because it's like I want to hear. It's fun to read the book and then hear some interviews from them and see the pair like the actual timeline lapse over,
Yeah.
you know, from what they were saying on an interview and then what they wrote down in their book. It's great to see that. Like another one was great. Watching Jerry Cantrell and then the Rex Brown interview icon series
Hmm.
and seeing them overlap because they all were friends together and they all lived together because Jerry Cantrell moved up to Texas for a little bit and is hearing how they're hearing both sides of their story overlap. So great.
Yeah. Spoken like a true music nerd.
But again, thank you so much. But everyone can still give her a follow on Instagram. I'm gonna have her handle posted down here along with Loudwire and everything else, so you can read. I'm sure you can find your old stuff, right? From Alternative Nation, right? Is it still up there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm still on the staff page. You can still, I mean, my YouTube channel's still there. I just haven't posted on it in probably 4 years. And yeah, so
There you go. Well, I'm gonna have all that posted in the bio, so you can give a heart, follow, positive comments. All right, none of that gatekeeping bullshit. I don't have that around here. Um, but thank you again, Lauren. I look forward to. We're probably gonna run into each other at a show. I run into everybody at a show.
yeah, definitely.
We're gonna run. It's gonna happen. I've literally. I went to Denmark for Copenhagen, and I ran into two people I know.
Oh wow. Well, that's an experience for sure.
It was like he was a drummer in another band. I'm like, he's like, dude, you're here. I'm like, yeah. Like, oh, I'm playing today.
Wow. All the
So
way
it's like
across the world,
the music industry is a small place. It really is. Like,
especially rock and metal. Yeah.
everyone knows everyone through someone. So it's gonna happen. But we got officially met. It was great to have you. Great to talk to you. So have a great rest of your weekend, and everyone keep your horns up, baby. Go to some shows.
Thanks for having me and talk soon.